Welcome, everybody, and thank you for attending the West Clermont School District Town Hall to learn more about the financial health of our district. My name is Mike Overby, and I'm an assistant superintendent here at West Clermont, and this is my third year in the district. But in the late 90s, early 2000, I was a 7th grade teacher at Glen Estee Middle School. I'm not a professional moderator, but I'm happy to be in the role for this town hall because it is important to reach as many people as possible with the facts about our district. Our goal this evening are to provide factual information on the state of our district, answer questions submitted by our community, and be mindful of everyone's time as well. This evening, our treasurer, Kelly Sininger, and our superintendent, Natasha Adams, will take time to highlight recent district celebrations, review district finances, where they will address questions submitted through the Thought Exchange survey, your question tonight, and questions submitted from our YouTube Live. And we would really like to explain the hope that exists in our district as well. There'll be no open mic session during the meeting, but we want to be able to answer your questions. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand at any time, and a team member will bring you an index card and pen on which to write your question. The team member will then collect the card from you and bring it to me. If you're watching this on YouTube, we also incorporate your questions into the meeting. We ask that the questions remain focused on school operations and finance or the March 2019 levy. Questions should not contain personal attacks or names of individuals or questions about specific district personnel. Also, we will do our best to consolidate questions that are similar. Please know that we will try to get to as many questions as we can while being mindful of everyone's time. If we do not get to your question, either Kelly or Natasha will follow up personally. So what we ask is that on your question, please write your name and a phone number or an email or some way we can get in touch with you. So at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Superintendent Adams and our treasurer, Kelly Sininger.
Thank you guys so much for being here. It just energizes us beyond belief to have a room full of people that are here interested to learn more about our financial health. We know our community has a big decision to make in March, and it's our job to really make sure that you're as informed as possible so you can make a good decision for your family. Tonight, I want to just point out, we have a wonderful board who leads the school district, and I know that several of them are here this evening, so if you guys will just wave. We have Jim Rudy, he's on the top there, he's the vice president of the board. Dave Schaff, member. Michael Chumbley, who is our newest board member. Michelle Delaney, she's in the front. She used to be our newest board member. Now she's old hat, I guess. And then we have Tammy Brinkman, who's been recently elected as our president of this board. And Kelly and I are just so blessed to have a team that has such high aspirations and high hopes for this school district. We're happy to work with them to make great things happen for the students. And so if you have questions tonight as we wrap up, and feel free to reach out to any of us. What I want to do is what we do in all of our administrative meetings and what we try to do in West Clermont in general, and that's to celebrate. We've got a lot of great things that are happening here, and we want to make sure that you as community members just get a quick sense. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it because we could do a whole evening just on celebration. But I want to just hit some highlights and make sure that everyone understands the good that's happening here and what we are investing in. So first of all, we have our new Wolf Pups. It's our preschool program, and they're currently going through the Step Up to Quality 5-star programs. So we should be hearing about our rating very soon. We have a premium that we put on our safety and security measures, and we are just so grateful in this community that we have first responders who are so collaborative with us, who care about us, who know us well, and are there for us always. There's a teacher in our district today. I don't even think she knows, that's why I'm not going to say her name, but we got a national award-winning teacher announcement today. And this Nancy Edmondson here is another one, but we are just so proud of our teachers who are known nationally, regionally, and throughout the state for educational excellence. We received a literacy grant over the last couple years that we've been investing in, and where we are seeing gains in our academics is mostly in literacy because of that investment. And we're just so happy that our team has taken the time to look for additional resources to supplement the already strong program that we have. Our community partners are what make those added value things come to life, and this just is one example. We have many, and we certainly in West Clermont would not be successful without all the people who reach out a hand to us to support us, whether it's with their time, their talents, or their resources. Achievement is on the rise across the entire district. We're highlighting here Holly Hill Elementary because they just recently got an award, but we're seeing improvements across our school system. They are being recognized specifically for their continued growth. They have gotten this award here on the left, the Momentum Award, for the last 3 years, and because of that success, received this year the High Progress Award. And so again, all of our teams are improving, but they just got recognized by the state of Ohio, so we wanted to celebrate that tonight. We have innovative programs. Farm to Table, our child nutrition director has just done an awesome job reaching out to local farmers, trying to source different opportunities for our students so that in this picture you're seeing them have fresh apples, but just introducing vegetables and they're able to make really creative dishes for our students that expands their palate and opens up a new world of eating to them. Social emotional learning. This is a huge emphasis in our schools. Not only is academics important, but with the age of technology and all the challenges that our kiddos face, we have to make sure we're balancing not only the academics, but the mental health and the social emotional. And so our team is very dedicated to growing this program. Community engagement. We started a family night and a parent education series that has happened here over the last 2 years to try to have moments like these where we come together and learn about how to best raise our children, because it's really a team effort. Sometimes our topics are about drug and alcohol. Sometimes it's about social emotional challenges. Sometimes it's about finances and looking on to college and what happens post-graduation. But we're really proud of these efforts. We have one-to-one technology for our 6th through 10th graders, and we have technology access across the school district. This is what opens up the worlds to our students, and so this allows not only the teacher in the classroom to be a resource, but the World Wide Web to serve as a resource that opens up doors and breaks down barriers for our students. State-of-the-art facilities. How many of you are in the high school for the very first time? Anybody? A lot of you. We are so proud of this building as well as several of the new ones. Willowville Elementary, Summerside Elementary, Clough Pike Elementary is being renovated right now, as well as some other schools from the past, Amelia and WT. We are just so blessed in this community to have such wonderful facilities, and we'll talk more about that later. We partner with the Wolfpack Pantry. We have a large percentage of our students who have poverty as just a part of their daily struggle. And so we work together as a team to supply food for them, clothes for them, and have opportunities to really do a community outreach. The Wolves Wellness Center, absolutely phenomenal resource. It's one of the very few wellness centers that are part of school systems across Ohio. So we're kind of ahead of the game on this, and they're cropping up, more and more every year. But schools are called to reach out and be part of the medical side of helping with students, whether it's their optometry or their dentistry or mental health. And so we partner with Mercy Health as well as Child Focus and Health Source to make sure that our students are ready to learn. And the Aspire program, a special program here in our high school that's for our special needs students that help them build the job skills that they need to be productive citizens in the world. And we're just really proud. People can come and have lunch, and we're just so proud of what they learn and how they're growing every day. Opportunities in athletic, arts, and activities. I know tonight we have a wrestling meet going down the hall. We are always in the running for a top seat in our athletic conferences and just many activities. Tonight we have a whole team of students who are running the sound system tonight. They've been in this room since 5 o'clock helping us take care of every single detail. They're learning real-world skills and being able to invest back in their community. And finally, WC Your Future program. We've been getting some questions lately about, Mrs. Adams, everybody's not going to college. What are you doing about that? Well, we are working hard to invest in options for kids to be able to tap into their skills and their interests, their passions, so they can find what they love to do. And whether they choose to enroll, enlist, or be employed, we want to make sure they're prepared to do that. And so that's what we're about, and our partners are helping expand this every day. We have amazing volunteers. And so that's where we wanted to start tonight, to say if it weren't for people in our community, our partners, our parents, and our teachers and our students and our staff all coming together, we would not be the proud school district that we are. And so we're just thankful for you for giving this time tonight. So now we'll start switching into the program. Just to let you know, our presentation takes a little under an hour to get through all of the details. This presentation has evolved over time. We've been presenting it since about May of last year, and as we learn of people's questions, we add pieces to it. So we hope to cover a lot of your questions tonight, and what we don't get to, as Mr. Overby said, we will follow up personally with you. When Mrs. Senninger and I were hired, it was made very clear to us right away that financial concerns were a top of mind for not only the Board of Education, but as well as the parents and the community. That was seen through surveys and just what people were sharing with me when I came here. And so we knew that one of the first things that we had to do as a team is to really dig into those finances and to really understand what does the community value and what's important. So this kind of Candyland type slide is really just meant to represent our journey. Kelly and I started with asking three main questions. The first question is, what do our students need? When they walk across that stage at Centos, what is it that they need for learning and for life? And so we use that to be our guiding light. Secondly, we asked the question, what kind of school district does our community want? Who do we want to be? So we started digging in, listening, asking lots and lots of questions about what does that look like and what do we aspire to be? And then the third question was, what is our financial health? How do we make sure that we line up our aspirational goals with our financial picture? And how do we come together as a community to make it happen? And so, as I said, this journey really shows this process that we went through that was about establishing a clear understanding of our financial health and explaining it and sharing it with the world, as well as a strategic planning process, so that we could get all of our arrows pointed in the same direction, heading successfully forward to make sure that we were maximizing all the talent here and getting stronger results for our students. So as we went through this process, you'll see we've done surveys, we presented to the board, and walked through the point where we knew that having to put a levy on the ballot was just going to be essential. And so we had to really wrestle with how much and what's this going to look like? Are we going to add services back? Are we going to need to make cuts? What's it going to be? So this shows that journey with the board, at the same time continuing to work with the board to cast that vision, to say we have strong high hopes for our school district. And so you'll see here, we've just kind of finished the January. We committed to everyone to say that we would announce the cuts that we had to make. As you've probably heard, we have to make $3.5 million in cuts if we're unsuccessful. And we committed to communicating that in January. So we did what we said. And it's not our favorite topic, but it's just part of our reality here. So the journey now takes us to, we've got to make sure that people are registered to vote. We want to make sure that everybody has a voice. And in our school district right now, Amelia Elementary has the highest percentage of parents who are registered to vote, and that's about at 80%. All the other schools are in the 70s. And so it's just an important part of the process that if to exercise your right to vote, then you need to be registered. So tonight we have tables out front if anybody wants to do that. And we're able to help give you links that you need to take care of that at home. We'll continue this push throughout January. Kelly and I will continue to be in different places throughout the community. It's really our desire to make sure people are informed. So we go to McDonald's sometimes. We are at the Everything Bagels. We're in people's homes. We've been in just other community locations as well as our schools to make sure that you have the information that you need and your questions are answered. So we'll continue this march all the way through the 17th of March. This slide, I won't go into great detail about it, but it is representative of our vision for West Clermont. The takeaway that I have for you tonight on this is that we have our hands on the wheel. Through listening to people, including everyone's voice, from students to parents to community partners to other community members, we have created this plan, and this roadmap plan really sets the tone and tells us where we need to go with our students to make sure that we have a very high bar and that we're receiving higher results. And we know in today's age that it takes not only a focus on academics, which is of course number one, but we've got to take care of that social emotional side of students. We've got to wrap our arms around the whole child and make sure that they're getting experiences that are going to help them thrive as they matriculate through our system and get ready for post-graduation. So here's our reality, and these points, one by one, are just significant, and it's why we're here tonight, to learn more. As you know, we have addressed many of our school facility needs in our community, and have done an absolutely amazing job at that. But at this time, the most important thing is that we turn our attentions to operating, and that's the day-to-day operations of the school district that include our staffing, our utilities, our supplies, as well as our busing. And whenever you're doing an operating levy, that we call that a levy for learning, because that's investing in everything that it takes to come together as a school system to educate your child. We're a low-spending district. You're going to hear us saying that a lot. We can't emphasize that enough. We are very, very lean. We have already stretched, cut, and reduced programs and services, and every day our students and our staff go without things. And these are things that are standard in most school districts. Some examples include updated curriculum. The state of Ohio has updated the standards a couple times, and at West Clermont, we haven't been able to catch up and provide the resources needed to match those resources. And so we are left to having to use free online resources, create things ourselves, and it makes the work like doubly hard for our educators. We have wonderful media centers in our elementary schools, libraries full of books and resources. But so when you walk by these spaces, you think, oh, well, they have a media center, they have a library. But the truth is, we don't. We have a room with books in it because we don't have anybody who staffs that. We all know that counselors and mental health crisis across our country is a huge, huge problem. And in our elementary schools, we don't have any counselors. And so the leadership of our schools are left up to a principal, a secretary, a custodian, and a part-time assistant in some of our buildings. That's a challenge in the schools that are the size of ours, and I can't understate that tonight. And so every day, our students and our staff are going without, and that's how we're in the place that we're in. And this is not a spending problem. We have a revenue problem. The state of Ohio's funding model is broken. The state is not magically giving us any more money, and our expenditures are 25% less than the state average per student. And Kelly's going to show you some more charts to help break it down and look at it in different ways, but it's just important to emphasize. And because we're such a low-spending district, because we work hard to be lean, to be fiscally responsible, and make our dollars stretch, any kind of cuts that we do in our system are going to affect the classroom experience. There's not a big pile of cherry on top kinds of things over here that, well, we could do without these cherries and these sprinkles and make do. The cuts that we have that will get us to the $3.5 million are cuts that impact the student experience, that impact the size of the classrooms, impact what teachers can do in those classrooms, impacts the overall experience that we know some of us get out of bed because of what happens when school ends, because of the athletics or the activities or the added value pieces to school. And that's what these cuts, because of our leanness, will have a negative impact. And so that's why it's been so important for us to engage with our community, make sure that everyone's informed, and that we put this ballot on in March so that we can continue to do the great work that we're doing now. I'm looking for it to move, and it's me who has to move it. To see how it personally affects you, a really good idea is to go onto our Clermont County Auditor site. And you can click on a little blue box with the proposed levies for March 17th, and it will show you precisely how this is going to impact you and your home. So I really encourage you to do that if you haven't done so already. But the key here is that for a $100,000 appraised home, it's a $23.30 per month additional tax. A lot of times we get questions about, well, what exactly is this going to fund? I want to know what this is going to fund. And what's different about this levy is that, in bond levies, you're often explaining, well, we're going to build this building, and there's going to be a gym, and there's going to be a playground, and there's going to be X and Y and Z. An operating levy is really about the operational pieces of a school district, the salaries and benefits of the staff, the supplies, the busing, the utilities. And so those are in general what it is, and we don't have any plans to add to what we're already doing. And so that's something that, getting into our 5-year forecast, when you look at those reports online, you can see more specifics, and Kelly will talk about it in detail a little bit later. But our goal here and the support of this levy in terms of what it means to vote for versus vote against. Voting for would mean that we are protecting our current level of educational and extracurricular services. We're keeping our class size targets the same that they are now, which they are very good, and so that allows for teachers to have a more personalized approach with their students. We're going to be able to continue all of our work to inspire kids, to help them tap into their passions, to offer those internships and experiences that let them dabble beyond the four walls of the classroom into the real world and really explore what they want to do as they grow up and leave us. And we need to provide support for our school operations. And so this is what the investment of the 7.99 levy will do for our school system. And so many of you are community members, and you may or may not know some of these facts about West Clermont. So who are we? Last year, we graduated 588 students out of the West Clermont High School second graduating class. And those students earned $10 million in scholarships, and we were very proud of them. And we know that our class this year is on pace to have similar results. Students who graduate from West Clermont have some choices in their life. 56% attend college, 40% the workforce, and 4% military. And you'll hear us say, are you going to enlist? Are you going to enroll? Are you going to be employed? And that's because it's really important to us that people understand all of their options, that we open as many doors as possible for our students, and that they have a genuine choice when they walk across that stage. You'll see here an overall rating in our school system is a C, according to the state of Ohio. And I'll tell you, I don't like having my name on a report card that has a C on it, I'll tell you that. And I'll also tell you that that's not good enough for us. We know we can do better. We can't do better without with continued strains to our budgets, but we know we can do better. We have the right teachers, we have the right people in place, and we know our students can do it. And so this is something that we are committed to improving. On one hand, I tell you, I don't want to stand here with my name on a report card that has the letter C. But on the other hand, I'll tell you, I stand proudly here in front of you today with a report card of the letter grade C when I consider the resource deficiencies that we have in the school district and what it really takes to achieve at that level. And so I'm very proud of what our teachers and our students doing together have been able to accomplish. And as I said, I know we can do better, but this is actually a proud moment. 684,000 meals are served here every year. And the breakdown of our students, just so you get a sense of the diversity of our community and the needs that our students have. We have 14% who are special education, about 34% are economically disadvantaged, and what we believe is that number is probably bigger. It's probably more of a range of 40 to 45. You have to fill out some paperwork to say that you are economically disadvantaged and that you need free and reduced lunch, and so we think some people don't like to do that. And so we know we have a needy population, and 24 different languages are spoken here. And so just this box alone shows you how much our teachers are stretching to meet the needs of our highest achieving students, as well as our neediest, most medically fragile, as well as students who are just coming into the country and learning English for the first time, and maybe even attending school for the first time. And our buses travel 6,000 miles per day. It's pretty amazing what it takes to operate a school district that's 24th largest in the state of Ohio. So Kelly and I, again, just wanting to hear the community's voice, to understand what people valued and what's important to them, we conducted a survey back in the fall. And this survey was a phone survey. And it was conducted by phone, and 70% of the people who participated were community members, and 30% of the people were parents who were in our district. And overall, that's a pretty good representation of our school district. And so the first questions I want to share with you tonight are, thinking of West Clermont School District, would you say that it is generally going in the right direction or the wrong track? And so we got a strong 64.2% on that rating. And our researcher said, anytime you get anything over 60%, that's a celebration. That's something to be really proud of. So we were happy about that. As we look to the next question, how would you rate the quality of education? We see that high 64 drops down to 55%. And as I have been asking lots of questions and just seeing with my own eyes, I really feel that 55% is calling out the fact that we have missing pieces here in our school system, things that are traditionally just available in schools and our standard are missing here. And so I think that's where that 55% comes from. And I think that especially because the next question, when we ask, so how do you rate the work being done by the teachers, that shoots back up to 60% positive. And so no matter what survey we do, no matter what forum we get into, time and time again, we're hearing about how wonderful our staff is and how much the teachers care and how much they take care of our students. And so we're just very proud of that, and we want to continue to build on that excellence. I'm going to share with you a little bit later more questions that we asked that helped shape our decision-making process as we led the board through the difficult decision to put a ballot issue for March. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to get into the financial numbers of our district.
As Natasha mentioned, we are the 24th largest school district in the state of Ohio in terms of public schools. There are about 610 public school districts, and when you look at our average daily membership, we are the 24th largest. We operate with 9 school buildings with an average grade level size of 650 students. We're the 7th largest employer in Clermont County with about 840 employees. Our per pupil spending, when you rank us compared to those other 609 school districts across the state, we are in the bottom 3%. 97% of the schools in the state of Ohio spend more per pupil than we do here at West Clermont. And that per pupil spending is 25% less than the statewide average. And we operate with an $84 million operating budget. And I stress operating here because unless you dabble in school finance very much, it can be very confusing about what is that woman talking about operating when you just built all these buildings. And it can be very confusing and a very frustrating issue. So we put together this slide to help clarify it a little bit. When we talk about operating here at West Clermont and in other school districts, your operating fund is your general fund. And we, along with every public school district in the state of Ohio, follows what is called the Uniform School Accounting System, and it's prescribed by the Auditor of State's office. And that requires that every school district in the state of Ohio have what is called a general fund. What our general fund funds here at West Clermont is a little over 90% of all of our staff salaries and benefits. It also funds all of our kindergarten through 8th grade busing. It pays for all of our utilities. It pays for our supplies in terms of custodial supplies, maintenance supplies, some educational supplies. Those are the primary drivers of our general fund or our operating funds. Everything that you see below the line is not in our general fund. So all of our food service operations, all the staff that are preparing the food or running the food service program, all the food itself, the equipment that it takes to prepare that food, all of that has to be segregated into a food service fund. It's not in that operating bucket. We receive about $5.5 million a year in grants. We apply for grants, receive those from the state and federal government. Because the grantor says to us, we're going to give you these dollars and you have to use them for a restricted purpose, they have to be maintained in a separate fund. In addition to that, over here on the right, we have a student activities and a student fees bucket. So if you have a student that's maybe pay to participate, to be in athletics or to be in the band, or maybe you have a class fee for a science lab, and you're sending your student to school with those fees, or you're paying those fees, they have to be segregated in that student activity bucket. We then also have a bond retirement bucket, and we have a permanent improvement bucket. And these are where our construction projects occur. And again, this can be incredibly confusing, and we've heard this question, we've received this question many times. Why did you build those buildings if you can't afford to operate them? Why didn't you use those dollars for your operating needs? So we wanted to clarify where exactly the dollars came from in order to fund these buildings. Back in 2007, you as a community went to the ballot and you approved a 2007 bond issue in order to build Amelia Elementary and WT Elementary. So every time you pay your property taxes, a portion of that is to pay the annual bond payment for Amelia and WT Elementaries. And it's put into a separate account. It's outside of operating. Then in 2015, in conjunction with the Port Authority issued on behalf of the district revenue bonds, and those were sold in the market. They did not go on your property taxes. It came with no additional tax increase for you in terms of a bond issue that generated $100 million specifically to build the high school. The high school was built, and currently we have an annual payment that we have to make to pay off the debt on the high school. That was in 2015. Because we invested the dollars from your bond issue for Amelia and WT, and we invested the $100 million to build the high school, which was no new taxes, that was $130 million, which we needed to come up with 106 to show the OFCC, the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, that we as a local community invested in our facilities. And the OFCC said to West Clermont, you come up with 70%, we will give you 30%. So our 70% was met with those buildings, and they provided us with $45 million specifically to build Summerside, Willowville, and to renovate Clough. They didn't provide us with $45 million and say, go use that for operating. We didn't have any choice but to use it for construction, and we're very, very fortunate that they provided us those dollars and that this community approved the AE and WT bond issue, and that our Port Authority worked with us in Union Township in order to get the bonds in to build that high school. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit about how the facilities were built and the fact that those funds could not be used for operating. One of the other questions that we get all the time is, well, you built these new buildings, and now what are the utilities like in that? The utilities had to have skyrocketed when you have these new buildings. I went back and I pulled utilities from 2009, and we spent just over $1.3 million. I went and I pulled all of our utility expenses for 2019, 10 years later, they went up $70,000. In that time period, we've increased square footage by over 100,000 square feet, and we've added air conditioning to all of our buildings. So I think that $70,000 increase is pretty phenomenal considering what we've added here in terms of our facilities. And that is out there on our frequently asked questions. And a narrative form of this is also out there on our frequently asked questions. So where do our operating revenues come from? Again, I'm talking about just that top bucket. 42% of our operating revenues come from the state of Ohio. As Natasha mentioned, the state of Ohio developed a funding formula years ago that was declared unconstitutional but is yet to be fixed. So that funding formula started with a base in 2019. That formula started with a base of $6,020 per student. Then what the state does is they look at certain factors in every single school district and determine how much of that $6,020 they will give to West Clermont. We get 45% of that. Okay, so we only get 45% of the $6,020, and in addition to that, for this biennium that we're in, our funding is currently frozen, and it is for every school district in the state of Ohio. So whatever you received in 2019, that's what you're going to get for the next 2 years. Even if our enrollment goes up, we're going to get the same amount of money. In addition to that, in that piece of pie, we receive about $550,000 a year for casino funding is in that piece of the pie. 48% of our pie here, of our operating revenues, comes from you as local taxpayers. And this pie chart reminds us every single day how important this community is to fund a local school district, to fund a public school district. And we don't take that for granted. And we know we don't like to ask you for money, but we're in a situation where we're at a crossroads here. 6% comes to us from the state in terms of property tax reductions or credits that you get if you meet certain criteria for owner-occupied or non-business credit, and that comes to us in the form of 6% of our funding comes from there. And then we have 4% of our funding comes from interest income and also some TIF revenues that we receive from Union Township and from Pierce Township. Where do our operating dollars go? 69% of our operating dollars go towards salaries and benefits. Somebody said to me in one of the first or second sessions that we did, and we've heard it in a couple of questions that have been emailed to us, 69%, that's out of control. That seems too much to be spending of your operating budget. And to that I would say, school districts are in the people business. We educate children with teachers. And so out of curiosity, I pulled the 15 surrounding school districts that we have to see how much of their operating budget they spend on salaries and benefits. The top 8 in that list were over 80%, We are third from the bottom with our 69%, with 2 schools below us that both spend 68%, to give perspective on how we compare to other districts. In terms of purchase services, that's our bus contract with Peterman for our K through 8 busing. There's utilities in there. In addition to that, if we have a student that lives here in West Clermont and that child's parents decide or caregiver decides that that student's going to be educated in another public school district or a community school, the state will make us book that revenue, but then have us book the expenditure because they are going to take not the 45% of the money that they gave us. They're going to take full $6,020 and send it down the road to the other public school district that that child is going to. So that happens with community schools, with public schools, as well as the state offers scholarships for special education needs. So we have to book it as a revenue, so it was in that 42% piece of the pie, and we book it as an expenditure as well. 1% of our operating budget goes out for supplies and materials, another 1% for capital outlay, and another 1% for other. That other is primarily county auditor and treasurer fees. So by law, when the county auditor and treasurer assess, collect our property taxes, they can retain a portion of that, and those are counted as county auditor and treasurer fees. So that's where we spend our operating dollars. So how does our spending compare? Again, we are in the lowest 3% in the state of Ohio. These are the 15 surrounding school districts, and you can see that Sycamore ranks there at the top, spending $14,335 per student, and we are third from the bottom at $9,414. Now, when the state of Ohio puts this information out, they put it out in a report that's known as the CUP report, and it's out on their website. And what they provide to you is not just your information, but they provide you with a statewide average. And you can see that that's the 5th line down. Our statewide average is spending $12,472 per student, and then they provide you with a similar district average. And you can see that the similar district average is $11,722 per student. And what that is the Ohio Department of Education looks through all those 610 school districts and looks at those that are most like you. They look at demographics, they look at wealth, and they pull the 20 that they believe are most like you, and that's what that number represents. So if we were to annualize our spending compared to what the statewide average is, you can see that we spend $3,058 less than what the statewide average is. If we multiply that by our end of the year enrollment, you can see that that equates to about just over $24 million less that we spend here at West Clermont than what the statewide average is. So how did we become one of the lowest spending districts in the state? As Natasha said, the district has tried its best to stretch as much as they can, to do as much as they can with what we have. We've had no new local operating revenue here since the operating levy was passed in 2004. And at that time, the voters approved a 7.9 mil levy. That was to generate $9,750,000. So when you went into that ballot box, into that election booth, you agreed that West Clermont was going to receive $9,750,000. And what's important here for school districts and other entities that have voted levies is there's a state statute known as House Bill 920. And what that statute says is, at your property values in your district begin to rise, then the county auditor, the State Department of Taxation, adjusts down that millage so that in the case of an emergency levy, whatever that number was that was put on that ballot, that's what that levy continues to generate. And there is some caveat if it's a substitute levy for a little bit more growth, and I'll show you what that impact has been for West Clermont. And so the House Bill 920 issue is something that a lot of people don't understand, because we've got a bulldozer on every third corner here in Union Township, and it seems like the school district should be rolling in money with all this new growth. And because of House Bill 920, that levy that was passed back in 2004, renewed in 2009, is still generating $9,750,000. And that's okay as long as you don't have an increase in your bus contract, you don't have any inflation on supplies, you don't have any inflation on your utilities. But we all know that we deal with inflation. And so when your revenues aren't keeping pace with just inflation, then you're going to be in a situation where ultimately you need additional revenue. During those years, we had multiple failed levies in school years 2011, 12, 13, and 14. During those years, there were significant cuts to programs and services. That's when your high school busing went away. That's when specials came out of the elementaries. The libraries went away. The guidance counselors went away. There was a 3-year salary freeze where no one in the district received increases for 3 years. Then, programs and services, when those cuts happened, we saw a decrease in enrollment and we saw a decrease in our academic performance index. And finally, during those years, also in 2013, the Ohio Department of Education placed this district in what's called fiscal caution, required them to develop a remediation plan, and that's when all the cuts were laid out, and the district was continued to be monitored for 2 years. So this is a slide to show the impact of House Bill 920 on West Clermont. So I know that here in Clermont County, our property values increased significantly in 2017. You probably saw it on your tax bill. So what I did is I went back and I looked to see what our appraised property values were in 16 compared to our appraised property values in 18 to get an idea as to what our values in property had gone up. They've gone up $487 million, almost $500 million in that 2-year period. What we've seen here in additional revenue, additional operating revenue, equates to about $370,000 per year, which is less than 3 days of our salaries. And so that gives some perspective, and this is the bar chart of exactly what our revenues have done over that time period, and that's because of House Bill 920. So when Natasha and I first started working together and we were talking about House Bill 920, she found this, this news clip out of a Cleveland news station that we think kind of helps clarify and also gives perspective on the fact that this isn't just a West Clermont issue. This is an issue that faces school districts across the state of Ohio, as well as other entities that have voted levies.
Cost of education has skyrocketed across the board. To understand how schools in Ohio are funded, you'll need a lesson in 3 things: history, math, and gymnastics. Here's our consumer investigator, Danielle Serino.
First, the history. Traditionally, property taxes have been a significant source of funding for public schools. But in 1976, concerns over inflating property taxes led state lawmakers to pass House Bill 920. It said schools could only collect the dollar amount voters approved for the levy and not a penny more unless another levy was passed. And it makes sense unless you factor in inflation and the rising cost of things like utilities and maintenance. All the while, the school's income stays the same. 20 years later, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled school funding based on property taxes was unconstitutional, and that lawmakers needed to fix it. But in the 2 decades since that ruling, nothing's been done. So that funding formula has been locked in the disco era for more than 40 years. Now to the math. Let's use fiscal year 2017 as an example. The State Board of Ed appropriated more than $12 billion. That includes nearly $8 billion from the General Revenue Fund and another $1 billion from the state lottery. Sounds like a lot of money, but it's still not enough. Which leads us to the gymnastics. Voters often feel they're forced to tuck, twist, and tumble back into the voting booth every few years to increase funding when schools need more money. And they've had to do those contortions repeatedly because of that 1976 fix. That leaves many voters with the impression that public schools don't manage their money well, so they vote against the levies.
Now, what about the money from the lottery? Well, the lottery does give a percentage of its earnings to fund education. But the way Ohio law is written, the lottery can have a banner year and donate billions, but the legislature only budgets a certain amount for education. Anything over that,
So
they
when
can
we go
spend
to a
how they
lot of
want.
these,
By the way, you can earn
presentations,
some
like
extra
Natasha
credit
said, we've
to
been
figure a
doing
way
this
out
for
of
a
this.
while.
Danielle
And
Serino,
this
Channel 3
This
News.
is the one that grabs the most attention, and said, you know, I've lived in this community, I've lived in this state forever, and I've never heard this. And we just think it's really important to our story in terms of how it's necessary for us to keep up with inflationary increases and other increases, but yet when your local revenue is not keeping pace with those, you come to the point like we are currently here at West Clermont. This is our summary of our 5-year forecast. We are required twice a year to file an operating forecast with the Ohio Department of Education. You can see at the top that our revenues are expected to grow at 1.81%, while our expenditures are expected to grow at 3.7%. You can see that that yellow line is our projected cash balance, and you can see that it dives pretty quickly down to negative $28 million. So what's in this forecast? Are we adding back things? Are we bringing in, as Natasha said, cherries or sprinkles? What we're doing is maintaining the current services that we have. We have 2.5% increase in there for supplies and materials. There's 2.5% increases in there for purchase services for things like the bus contract or our utilities. In terms of salaries, our salaries are currently based on our negotiated agreements, which are through to June 30th or July through 2000 this school year. Some of the contracts end in July, some end in August. And for the out years, they're in at 2.5%. So does that mean if this levy passes that every employee in West Clermont is assured a 2.5% increase? That's not what that means. That means that there is 2.5% available in order for us to meet the district's needs, whatever those may be. If we start to increase enrollment and we need to meet certain class size targets like we've said that we wanted to do and was one of our goals, and we need to add more teachers to do that, then that will be part of the 2.5%. In the state of Ohio, and maybe in other states, I'm not sure, but there are state and federal guidelines that require a certain ratio between special education students and teachers. So if we have more students that are identified with special needs and we have to meet those ratios of 1 to 16 or whatever those ratios are, we may have to hire more teachers. So I just wanted to clarify that just because there's 2.5% there, that doesn't necessarily equate to everybody's assured. There's a negotiating process that the school district will go through with both of the bargaining units, and that will happen here in the next few months. In terms of the benefits, that's another really big driver for school districts. The primary benefits are retirement and medical insurance. So, like all school districts in the state of Ohio, if you're a full-time employee, you contribute to either the school employees retirement system or the state teachers retirement system. And both of those systems require that the employer have a contribution. So that's a driver here in our benefits. Medical benefits are also a big driver, as they are in many both private and public sector. What is in here are our current rates that we have. We are part of an insurance consortium with 9 other school districts here in the area, and we've reached out to our insurance consortium and others and said, what's a good number? What's the industry standard there for medical insurance? And it was 7% in the out years of 21, 22, 23, and 24. And so that's what's in that forecast.
So through this process, we've been asked, especially by parents, why aren't you asking for more? Knowing that you start the presentation with our students and our staff are going without, why are we not adding back in? And I'll tell you, it's through this process and data that we analyzed and through listening to the community that got us to this place. First of all, we know that our #1 priority is to stabilize so that we can continue all the programs and services, the great class sizes we have, and all the extracurriculars that we currently are able to offer. We learned through the survey that I mentioned to you guys earlier that was 70% of the people were representative of the community, where 30% were attached to students in our schools, that our communication was not rated very high. It was 45.6% positive. And whenever you see a communication rating like that, it really lends itself to question the trust between a community and a school district. And since I came as superintendent and Kelly as treasurer last year, we have probably quadrupled the amount of communication that comes out of our school system. But I will tell you, it's challenging. We don't have a huge budget for flyers and mailers. We have to rely on the Clermont Sun helping us by putting things in the paper for free, social media. So we try to maximize those resources because it really is our desire to have information out to you. We want to make sure that every presentation we give, every video we make, every flyer we have is posted on our website so that you can reference it and use it to help make your decisions informed. And so it's our commitment to continue to build trust and to share facts that will help avoid misconceptions. Also, in our community feedback that we heard face-to-face as we were working with families and community throughout the system, it was also echoed in our survey. And that is that we found the majority of the community does support additional taxes to support the school systems and to make sure that we protect and preserve everything that we already have. And our community doesn't want to see cuts. They want to see us continue to stay on the rise and great things happening. And so what I want to show now is just the breakdown of this, what it looks like. We found when we asked the question, do you support or oppose additional local tax funding for the school district in order to maintain the current amount of teachers and avoid cutting programs and services? Again, we were back to that high 60.7%. And we were thrilled that people were very supportive in that. As the survey continued, there were questions later on down the road that got a little more specific, and that's where the response changed. The plan to maintain the current amount of teachers and avoid cutting programs and services would be funded with a new property tax for the 7.99 mills. And it would be collected for 10 years. Do you support or oppose this plan? And in this data, we learned that positive rating of 60% then dropped to 42%, and then another 16% unsure. And so what this was telling us was exactly what we were hearing face-to-face from people, is that either people don't support it because they are just against it, or they can't afford this. And so it was something we had to pay attention to. And it was the message that told us adding would be extremely difficult. Additionally, some questions in the survey said, okay, if we could add to this 7.99, if we could bring back some services, what would you prioritize as a community? And we were really hoping that something would emerge to the top that we could use to help be successful. But what we found in that survey is that about 24% of people wanted to add high school busing, and another 24%, roughly, tied for wanting to bring back elementary specials, which is music, art, PE, technology. And so that tie really told us that we have split priorities at the moment, and that just adding one could really disenfranchise one segment of the population, and adding the other would do the same. And so we had to be very cautious there and really think about our priorities. If we added both of those together to add them to the levy, that was going to put us in a double-digit millage rate. And we knew that that would be dead on arrival and not successful. And so as we weighed all these out with our Board of Education, those were the data points that we used to help walk through this process. You can see here in this graph, it's similar to the one that Kelly showed earlier, but these green bars show the additional revenue coming into our system. You see that yellow line stabilizing and getting us through 2024 with less than 2 months of expenditures as the cash balance. And so this is what the impact would be to our 5-year forecast. And again, this forecast is in great detail, linked onto our website that you can look at and review line by line by line to understand it in depth. So as part of this process, it's important for us to do our due diligence and really look at, if we aren't successful at the ballot at March 17th, then what hard decisions is the district going to have to face? And so when you do the math, we figured that it was going to be $3.5 million in cuts that we would need to make. That is equivalent to 60 staff members, and that's the message that we used in this district for a long time until we got into the weeds and really dug in. As we've gotten more specific with our cut list, that's more like just at least 46 positions will need to be eliminated in our school system. And then we added other programs and services that would be impacted. And so the big takeaway, there's a lot of numbers to look at on this slide, but this is the thing that's really important to note, is that $3.5 million comes out in the 2021, and it stays out all those years. We got a question on one of the thought exchanges. So after you bring it out this year, like when are you going to start bringing it back? Well, you can see here on the screen, it's not coming back. And if we are unsuccessful, you'll see that we're only going to stay in the black for a small amount of time. We would immediately be in a deeper deficit, and we would have to go back to the voters or make additional cuts. And so the board would have another difficult decision to make. And so that, again, the takeaway is that $3.5 million comes out and it stays out across the board. And so that's why it's such a difficult decision as you're thinking about taking away programs and services for students. So we wanted to make sure that you understood our guiding principles for why we chose the cuts that we did. And again, the goal is to get to $3.5 million. And when you're a people business, the only way to get to that high dollar number is to involve people. And so that's what our cuts emphasize. And that's the bulk of our cuts. Our main goal was to limit the impact on the classroom. And as I said earlier, it's near impossible when you're dealing with people, and people serve students. But that's what we wanted to protect as much as possible. We also wanted to look at the board aspirational goals for us. The Board of Education wants us to be a destination district, wants us to be a place that is award-winning, nationally recognized, where we are thriving and students are coming and teachers are wanting to stay and building a career here. And we built a strategic plan to help take steps toward that bold vision. And so we wanted to do everything that we could to protect the programs and services that would help make that happen despite the setback. And then finally, we wanted to have equitable distribution across the school district. So we didn't look in one segment of our population and hit any one area. We were looking to see how can we impact elementary, middle, high, and how can we make sure that we are being fair, fair is probably a strong word, equitable across the board when it comes to classified staff versus our administrative staff versus our certified staff. And so that's what we set out to do. The way these cuts are set up, they're arranged in everything on the left would be eliminated, and then the right side is reduced. And I'm not going to go through here and read point by point. That's not really our main message tonight. Our goal for you is just to make sure that you're informed. We don't want to dwell on it. We're not trying to be threatening at all. We just want to make sure that you understand what's at stake, because everyone has a really big decision to make. And so the things that I would just note is that we're impacting academic programs and athletic programs. And in a high school, what that ends up translating to is class sizes go up, options for students go down, the choices are limited, and that above and beyond experience, beyond the school day, the core programming of reading, writing, math, social studies, just becomes very limited. And so tapping into those passions that we said is so important and building those skills for the workforce become limited in this scenario. And our pay-to-pay participation goes back up to $500. And what I'll point out about that is athletics currently it definitely goes beyond their means in terms of what it really costs to run a strong athletic program. And it's typical in school districts that the operational funds have to supplement their programming. And so for us here in West Clermont, over the last several years, that additional money we've had to put into the athletic funds has been like $400,000 every year. And so by upping this pay-to-play, we'll be able to keep some more money into operating, and we would only be supplementing by about $100,000 per year is our estimate. In the middle school, we have a very large middle school. We know that adolescents at that age are very tender, and they need a specialized programming. And so right now we have teaming inside of our middle school to make that large place feel small so that those students can feel connected from the minute they walk in the door. When we do the cuts, it would cause us to have to eliminate that small school feel because more teachers would have to teach more core options. The encore programs, which are the equivalent of middle school specials, music, art, PE, would be limited. And so choice goes down, class size goes up. Additionally, you'll see that there's 2 miles of busing here that I'll talk about for both elementary and middle school, is that we would have to go to the state minimum requirements, and anybody living inside of those 2 miles would be affected. In our district, it's just under, is it 3,000 or 6,000? I'm forgetting why I'm standing here. Just under 3,000 students affected, a smaller portion of the middle school, but a quite large portion of the elementary students. In the elementary, gifted services would be eliminated, as well as specials would be reduced, and some of our, the building time would have to change. And this is some things that people were asking questions about. Why do you have to change the building time? Well, the building time would have to change because we need an extra 15 minutes on the front of the day and another 15 minutes at the back end of the day just to manage traffic, to get people off the roads and into the schools. And so that cuts into instructional time that over time builds up. Additionally, because of the 2-mile restriction, we have to change Amelia and Clough to a later start and Merwin and WT to an earlier start. And that's all about doing the math. It's about the efficiencies of the routes and trying to get as many people on buses to their places as quickly as possible. So it's not random why those schools were chosen. It's all about just efficiencies through the routes that Peterman created for us. In district office and programs across the district, we'll have administrators reduced. The way we're able to use our facilities with our community will be impacted. Our student services will be limited, and our supports for instructional help with our principals will be affected, as well as the clubs and activities. So again, there's a detailed list on our website. I don't want to dwell on this right now, because this is what's most important to us, is that people understand that here are the facts, this is our story, and right now we know that the most important thing for us to do is to stabilize the school district, to keep the positive momentum going and keep our feet on the ground so that we can continue to take this district to great places. However, we know that our work is not finished. We know that stabilization is not good enough, and so that means for tomorrow, that means we've got to continue to engage with you as a community. We can't just pass a levy or fail a levy on March and just say, okay, well, never mind, forget about the community. We've got to continue to work together to think about how do we partner? How do we solve some of these challenges that are imperative for our students? And that's what we commit to do, is that today we work to stabilize, tomorrow we continue to plan, we continue to work together. And so what Kelly and I are going to do now, and we're going to transition to the question part of the day. We have on our website, we had a thought exchange, which is our tool that we use to gather feedback, and we got some questions that were important to people, so we want to be able to go ahead and answer those for you tonight. Then we had some people send questions in on our info@westclair.org, and we know that you may have some questions out there. So we plan, I'm trying to figure out what time it is right now. Okay, we plan to have a hard stop at 8:30, so we will work through these questions first, and then gather questions from you guys in the audience. Whatever we're not able to get to in this forum, because we really do want to be respectful of your time, we will work to personally call you or email you and make sure that you have the information that you need. Okay, so one of the first questions. After about a decade of mismanaging a budget and not putting merit-based pay as an option, why shouldn't the state take over? So one of the things I want to emphasize with this answer is that, as we mentioned, the state of Ohio's funding formula is broken, and it has been for a very long time. And so this is what community after community in Ohio have to face. They have to figure out, how are we going to fund our schools? And because how the expenditures and the revenue don't keep pace with each other, it causes people to have to come back to the voters. And West Clermont School District, from my point of view, being new here and just digging into the details, I'm quite amazed with everything that has happened here, how we continue to do more with less. If you look at the history, there have only been 2 operating levies here in the last 2 decades. And so when the mismanaging budget is just, it's hard for me to follow that mismanagement part when I look at these realities and how far this district has really gone to stretch their operating budget and make great things happen here. What I will say is that in December, as in our district, we were identified as precautionary financial state status. And it's one of those declarations from the state, similar to the precaution state that the district was in before, that the state of Ohio begins to take you through when your 5-year forecast isn't showing that positive balance. And so we are now in that process, and Kelly is having to work hard to go detail by detail, line by line, and show to the state what our remediation plan is. And so I know I heard some rumors in the staff as we were going around explaining things to people that Staff said, wouldn't it just be better if we just let the state come in here and take over? And what I want to be clear about that here is that the state coming over isn't like a good thing. The state taking over means that you lose local control completely. And they come in and tell you what to do, and they keep putting levies on the ballot until something passes. And this isn't, they don't come with a magical check and like solve it for you. They just come in and take over and try to remediate. And so I just want to just be clear that's our reality. Next question is, why do you use the school's social media and webpage to promote the levy? Isn't that an ethics violation with the state of Ohio? So first of all, what I want to be clear is that as a school system, it's our job, it's imperative that we do our due diligence to communicate to the community, to the staff, to the parents, what our financial state is. And so that's exactly what we've been doing. It would be inappropriate for us to be campaigners. We're not allowed to use school district equipment, time, or resources at all to be promoters of the levy. Like, we can't say vote yes. Like, that's not what we do. And we've taken a lot of care in our school system this year to make sure that all of our administrators were equipped with levy do's and don'ts, and then that our staff was also communicated with, so that no one accidentally stumbled into this. Because we know this is, when you're dealing with your children and you're dealing with finances, it's a very personal issue. And it is our job to inform and to communicate, and that's what we're committed to doing, using all the channels that we have. But we are not here to try to tell somebody to vote yes or to vote no. That's a personal decision. Okay. The next question, is it safe to say that staff compensation is the reason that we have a budget crisis? Why are some staff getting paid close to six figures?
And I would go back to what we were talking about before in terms of how much of our operating budget is spent on personnel. 69% of our operating budget goes toward our personnel. We rank, in terms of our 15 surrounding school districts, we are in the lowest 3 of those. In terms of salaries themselves, how they are set, it's through a negotiation process that the administration and the board go through with both of our unions that we have. That happens in school districts all across the state. And we have to remember that we want to stay competitive. And when you have a salary freeze for all of your staff for 3 years, you start to turn into a real farm team of where you train teachers, they stay for a year, and then they go down the road because they can make more money at a neighboring school district. And so when you compare what teachers make here at West Clermont to the statewide average, we're below that statewide average. If you compare what we are to those similar district average, we're below the similar district average. And so to answer that, I would say that salaries we do our best with the resources that we have to stay competitive, to keep our teachers, because we need that stability here for our kids. To see those same teachers year after year, and to invest in those teachers and give them the resources that they need to get the best outcomes for our kids in those classrooms to get them across that stage at the end of the year.
And for several years in a row, we were having double-digit turnover, so you were just like churning people in and out of here. This last year, we had 6% turnover, so we feel like we're going in the right direction, and we're very proud of that, and we want to continue that. Because when you invest in professional development, when you invest in your teachers, they can keep going deeper in their learning and produce stronger results versus retraining everybody every single year because of churning people in and out. The next question is, why did you put programs back in the budget that you couldn't pay for? You could have predicted it. Waste spending. And so what I'll say is that Kelly is required, and as every treasurer in Ohio, to create a 5-year forecast every year. One is in May and the other is in November. And so it's important, like as a community, that's a good like moment in time, a benchmark moment to really to watch those numbers and to kind of see where they're going. I'll say, when I came to West Clermont, one of the ways that the financial situation here was described to me was we've kind of been on cardiac arrest. We've been on the operating table surviving, and we've had to do everything that we can just to kind of get out of that mode. And people started to feel, with all of the creative work and the progress that's been made here, is that we were getting into wellness mode, where people were starting to be on that treadmill, starting to think about their diets and being able to be a healthier school system. And so that really was an image to me that evoked a lot of just thought. And so what I equate this to is that West Clermont has really been in response mode. Everything has been, how do we restore those services? How do we get back to where we once were? How do we make sure our students have what they need? And so that's the mode that we've been in, so that we can not only attract and retain our staff, but that we can attract families, because we still have a large number of families choosing to educate their students elsewhere. And so the salary freeze ended so that we could focus on retaining and having high-quality staff. And we were able to work it out to be able to provide some more revenue there, or some more salaries there. And then the busing, elementary specials, those little pieces they're standard in most districts. These are critical pieces to a whole child's experience. And so those were brought back into the school system in an effort to attract families, to be able to keep people here and keep investing in West Clermont. The next question is, an important part of today's school is providing mental health and other types of assistance, since students have too many pressures and burdens these days. Putting money into helping students with mental health and emotional issues is a reality of today's world, and it can go a long way to make schools successful. And so what we want to be clear about is a portion of our budget does invest in this. Of course, we want to be able to invest a whole lot more, and we're very thankful for our grants and our partnerships that we have throughout the community to help support this. And we will continue this effort. Pass or fail of the levy, we will continue our efforts. What we're hoping to be able to do, of course, is to stabilize so we can continue to grow and deepen our abilities and just build stronger capacity across the school system. This next question is, can you share with the community what levels of property tax who live in other successful districts pay? For example, Mason, Lakota, Sycamore, and Anderson or Forest Hills. I feel like it is important to show what an investment in education for your community looks like, and I am curious if what people pay here is lower now.
So that same CUP report that I told you the Ohio Department of Education puts out every year, one of the categories that is on there is how much property tax is raised per pupil in each school district. And you can see in the question, it was specifically for Mason, Lakota, Sycamore, Anderson. So I pulled those, and you can see that in Mason, they generate a little over $6,800 per pupil. In Lakota, it's also a little over $6,800. Sycamore is at $14,000. Forest Hills is at $6,700. The statewide average is a little over $6,000 that communities are providing to their school districts. The similar district average is $7,600, and here at West Clermont, we're at $4,954. In addition to this, I was curious to look to see what the millage rates look like in other school districts. And so in a 4-county area, which is Butler, Warren, Hamilton, and here in Clermont, there are 49 school districts, and when you rank their millage rates from highest to lowest of those 49, we're down at number 37, and the 12 that are the lowest, in addition to those 12, there are 6 of them that, in addition to paying a property tax, their residents also pay an income tax. So that's an additional amount that they are investing in their district.
One thing I just want to point out, it's hard to compare school districts, demographics, makeup of the community, all kinds of reasons. And so it's just hard to get an apples-to-apples comparison. So we do our best to be able to illustrate those. But one thing I want to point out here is that in West Clermont, that our tax base is 75% is from residential, about 24% is commercial, and then about another 1% is public utilities. And so that shapes how our funding works, and is an important piece of the story. And again, it's hard to just, communities right next door don't have that same breakdown as we do, and so it makes it hard to compare sometimes. Okay. Has the district considered closing open enrollment, more long-term vested interest versus those who are only transferring for athletics, for example? And so what I want to say about that is that open enrollment is something that we will look closely at every single year. That's required by our board policy, and we want to make sure that our class sizes are appropriate for our West Clermont students. And so what is special about this here is that the students who come into West Clermont as open enrolled students bring finances with them. The state brings that full portion of money from their school district to ours. And so it's not like we're expected to pay for them without that support. And so that's actually a benefit for us at this point. And at this time, we have 145 open enrollment students in our school district. And as I said, every year we would take a look at that, because it's just something that, just depending on the flow of children, how that's going to impact a certain grade level or a certain class. And so we want to make sure our class sizes are good for our students. How is West Clermont directly helping non-college bound students? The Oaks are not the best answer. And how is or will West Clermont directly meet those needs of the students? West Clermont District will show its improved value and be worth the extra taxes by making sure that all students receive needed training, no matter the direction. Well, the first thing I'll say is that this is a huge part of our strategic plan and for our roadmap for success. We vitally believe in the importance of inspiring our young youth as early as kindergarten even, to start thinking about what difference they want to make in the world, how do they want to change the world, and what do they want to create, what do they want to invent. And so we want to tap into their special talents, interests, and find their gifts so that we can help put them on a path that gives them choices in their school courses and their experiences that really shape that. And so what we call our program here is WC Your Future. Get it, see your future, because we want everyone to kind of look forward and have that hope and that inspiration to work hard in school. And so we have tools in our system. One is called Naviance. It's a tool that's used at the middle school and the high school. It's an online program that helps students research college and work opportunities, to track all of their college essays, and it kind of keeps everything in a one-stop shop, but helps them easily research across the country. And that is a newer program in our system that's continuing to be used in more impactful ways. We have mentoring, thanks to partnerships that we have with our school community. And we're continuing, like every week, Mr. Overby is out on the community working to gain partnerships, to get people to experience what does it mean to work in IT? How can we get some experience at a healthcare facility? How can we tap into the lawyers in the community? How can we tap into the service industry so that students can actually have an internship? Some of our internships have turned into summer jobs and summer opportunities, but the kids can explore. And even if they're ruling out what they want to be when they leave here, it's a valuable experience. And so this is hugely important, and that we want to invest a lot of our time and our resources into this. And currently, we are working hard, the high school staff in particular is working hard to take the new requirements of the state of Ohio pathways to create those paths clearly for students, so that they can know when they come in as freshmen all the steps they need to take to be able to be successful and set them on course for their post-secondary experience. If the operating levy were to fail, how long would it be before the cuts could be restored? The community needs to understand not just the short-term consequences, but the long-term consequences, as well as with not being able to remain competitive. And so as I showed you on that chart earlier, that $3.5 million comes out and it stays out over the course of the 5-year forecast without plans to return those services and those programs and those staff members. And so considering our forecast and that the cost of inflation and the lack of revenue, there's just no plan for them to return. And we would immediately putting these cuts into place starting in July as appropriate, but for the next school year. And so it's an immediate response, immediate reaction, and that's why this conversation and growing in our understanding as a community is critical at this time. We would like to see the actual data of where each dollar is expected to go. The county auditor's site does not break this down, and it's important to our community to see exactly where the money will be used.
And in terms of what the additional ask is in the operating levy, it funds the current 5-year forecast. And that five-year forecast is in detail on our website, and what I provided here today is the summary. And it's those things that I talked about. It's a 2.5% increase on supplies and materials and purchase services and salaries at the 2.5, and the health care and the retirement. When you roll those expenses into our 5-year forecast, as Natasha showed with the little green bars, what these additional dollars do is fund that forecast. And so you won't find that information on the county auditor's office. The only place you'll find it is on our website for the detailed 5-year forecast.
Okay, and this was a question that came in on our info at West Clare. I'd like to know how many people work in the main office and the total cost this year for the wages of the people who work in the main office. Yeah, so Kelly's going to take this.
Okay, so what we do is if right now there are 62 positions, and if a position is not dedicated to a building 100% of the time, then we assign that person to district office. So in here you may have our maintenance guys who are out working throughout this district every single day. They don't have an office in district office, but they're assigned to district office. We have in here our child nutrition supervisors, or our child nutrition coordinator, or our managers who are working our food service program. They are assigned in this 62%. In terms of what the total salaries are for those 62 positions, it's $4 million of our salaries, which is 7% of our total district salaries. In terms of the next question, this person would like to know how many of those positions would be cut if this levy were not to be successful, and the answer to that is 5, which is 8% of the total district office positions. And also this person asked the question, I also wonder if any cuts will be made to the main office even if the levy passes. And the answer to that is we don't have any plans right now of cutting anyone or making any changes to the total overall positions in district office if this were to continue.
Well, and a lot of times when people think district office, they think administrators, so I just want to shed some light on our administrative staffing throughout the district. The state of Ohio in this CUP report that Kelly keeps referring to puts out a ratio between administrators to students in the school district. And for West Clermont, in order to get to the state average, we would have to add 22 administrators to our staff. And so what I want to point out here is that we are very lean in an administrative staffing model. And even we have several people in our district office that have an office in our office, and they work there with us, and they're part of our team, but the majority of their time is spent in buildings. Our true philosophy is that supporting the buildings and supporting the classrooms and the teachers and the administrators in the buildings are our #1 priority. And within our district, it just feels like there's almost an entire layer of people missing because we need our people in the district office to kind of serve quasi roles. But we've made it a priority to prioritize their time in the buildings, and so that's how we make do. That's how we make it happen. So I just thought you'd find that interesting. And then finally, we've gotten some questions just about the 2-mile requirement with busing that we just want to clarify a few things. So how is the 2-mile walking area calculated? The distance is calculated from the end of the residence driveway to the entrance of the school using the most direct route by a motor vehicle. And so this is actually something that would be timed and tested. And for private parochial schools or community schools, it's the same thing. It's about their private school or their parochial school, not about the home school that they would have gone to, that 2-mile radius applies. And then what about daycares? Daycares within the 2-mile driving distance of the school of attendance will not receive transportation. Daycares that provide transportation independent of West Clermont may continue. And so we will continue to update our FAQs on our website around transportation because there's just a lot of nuances there, and we know that's important as we move forward with this process. Okay, Mr. Overby, it's 8:24. It looks like we have some time for more questions, so if you've found some for us from the audience, we're happy to take them.
Okay. So there was quite a few questions around the rationale behind some of the reductions or cuts that would be in effect if there was a levy failure. Can you talk just a minute about why the ratio of administrators, not more administrators, less teachers, and then kind of factor into the amount of busing funds that we will save and why that was part of the decision-making process?
Spreadsheet right in front of me, but when we looked at the number of positions that were cut by classified, which are, to give an example of our classified staff, that's like our maintenance guys, our administrative assistants, our custodians, those are classified positions. Certified positions are our teachers primarily, and then you have your administrators. So when we went down and we were determining the cuts, we cut 5%. I want to say 5 5 or 6. Whatever it was equal in terms of the number of positions that we cut out of each one of those categories. In terms of the transportation, as to why transportation was cut, it was because of that number one guiding principle that we had, or it might have been number 2, and that is to lessen the impact or not impact the classroom experience to the best of our ability. And so when it came right down to it, the busing compared to the classroom experience, we followed that first guiding principle was, does this affect the classroom? And that's how we arrived at making the determination to go to the 2-mile radius.
Who was part of the decision-making around the reductions?
We worked through a collaborative process with our administrators, our cabinet team at the executive level, as well as building administrators to uncover. We spent time sharing with our union leadership just to bounce ideas and to share and get some reaction and some feedback to that. And then we walked the board through that process because we used their feedback as well. And ultimately, they made a decision at a board meeting to adopt the cuts that we presented. And I can't echo enough the terrible experience that it is to think about taking one thing away from our students and from our staff, because they deserve so much more. It's terrible. So it's really, you have to follow guiding principles, and you have to look at the numbers, and you have to do the best you can to protect the classroom, and that's really where we emphasize our time and our efforts, and uncovered every rock that we could to look, where can we be more efficient? Where can we protect that classroom as our number one priority?
Who did the feasibility study, if the, i.e. on the budget, on the future operating expenses? Sorry, who did the feasibility study with the 5-year forecast on the future operating expenses?
When the 5-year forecast that we use is a tool that is a tool that is put out by Public Finance Resources. And Public Finance Resources, which is now called Forecast 5, they work with over 300 school districts in the state of Ohio. And the company itself is made up of experienced treasurers that have been doing this for a very long time. And in addition to that, they have people on their staff who worked with the Department of Education as well as the Ohio Department of Taxation, so that we can get the best estimates on property taxes, on any of those outside factors that are impacting education, whether that be from the state budget impacting the Ohio Department of Education's budget, or here locally what our tax base and what our increases are projected to be. And so I didn't do this alone. I've been here 14 months, and I certainly would hope that you wouldn't think that I would do this on my own. So being a new treasurer, I reached out to those sources that could help guide me in that process, and ones that have a lot of credibility, and they know this stuff backwards and forwards. And I can tell you that along the way, I made sure that there's not a number in there that I don't understand and that didn't make sense to me. And that I own that forecast, and I can assure you of that, but I did have their assistance in guiding through the process to say these are the things that are impacting school districts in your area as well as across the state.
And one of the benefits for working with this company is some of the tools that Kelly is able to use. So if you attend our board meetings, or if you go on our board docs online, you can see really detailed reports that are given with this 5-year forecast that tells a deeper story. And we're really impressed with the amount of communication that can come out of not just the numbers, but the why behind the numbers, that I think are incredibly important as you work and communicate to a larger audience. And it's not just about the treasurer understanding it, it's about a broader audience understanding it and us working together.
So there's a couple short, quick possible answers to the next series of questions. So the levy will generate $11.5 million, but you have said only $3.5 million will be cut if the levy fails. What will be done with the other $8 million?
And that's when in the slide that Natasha showed, where we cut that $3.5 million, and by cutting that next school year, that leaves us with a positive cash balance of about $4.2 million that gets us into the next couple of months after that. I'm not sure if you noticed it or not, but in the very next year, we're right back into a negative cash balance situation. So this was the item that Natasha mentioned. We would have to go right back to our board and go through this process all again to say, are we going on the ballot or are we cutting the rest? And so that's the process that will happen as soon as we know the election results in March.
Is this a continuing tax, or is there a stopping or sunset time?
It's a 10-year.
Is the increase based on 2019 assessed property values or after the 2020 reevaluation process?
It's based on the 2019. But the levy language will go on the ballot to generate $11,500,000. So if property values go up, as I mentioned, the millage will be adjusted down so that the levy still generates $11,500,000.
How would the levy apply to renters or people who don't own their own homes? Would they contribute to the levy?
Well, the property is owned by the property owner, and so that property owner could influence what they charge in rent. But every person who lives here and is a registered voter would have a voice in the outcome of the levy, and the impact, it could impact them just depending on how their landlord decided to set those rates.
When does the education sector unite to address the school funding issue in Ohio? When or how does this education sector unite to address the resolving the school funding issue in Ohio?
Currently there is some legislation out there, and it's the first time there's been hardcore legislation that's tangible, where models can be worked from through the Cupp-Patterson. So that's something that you could Google and learn more about. It's not really moving anywhere right now in the legislature, but it's out there, and it's the thing with the most legs over the last several years. And there was some real action last summer where we thought there might be some changes. I will say that it's a different way of thinking about funding Ohio schools. It doesn't magically take away the residents' responsibility in that. There's no magical thing that's going to happen, but it does have some possibility and some promise for West Clermont as we've seen the early the models. So again, nothing magical is going to happen. More and more responsibility of funding and taking care of our schools really falls on the property tax owner.
And one thing I would say with regard to that Cupp-Patterson, as Natasha said, it doesn't take the burden off the property owners, but if you've ever looked at that school funding formula, it is so incredibly complex that only people who have been in the school systems for years and years, and even many of them don't understand it. So the Cupp-Patterson model tries to simplify the way schools are funded and puts a per pupil for different elements in your school system. When the scenarios came out last year, when they ran the scenarios for all the school districts and said, if this went into effect today, here's what the impact would be on your school district. It's not a silver bullet for us. It was about $900,000, or in one case, it was about $1.4 million a year. So it's in no means close to $11.5 million, but it was going to give us a little bit of a bump.
We know you've been a great audience, and we can't thank you enough for your time tonight. That means the world to us. And for any of you who are streaming us live, we're just so thankful that you've given some time to learn and to share with us. This is a picture of our website that shows you a levy info section. So we would encourage you to go on it. Look at the FAQs that have been created. Look at the one-pagers and use it as a tool. Share it with other people who maybe weren't able to be here tonight so that we can all be as informed as possible. Call us, ask us more questions, come to coffees or community chats, as we're calling them, that are also scheduled on here. You'll see, if you go to community chats on our Levy site, you can see where we're going to be throughout the community over the next couple weeks, because once you drive away tonight, you might have other things that have caught your attention and that you want to know more about. So we're happy to answer those. And finally, just thank you on behalf of Kelly and myself, our entire administrative team, the staff who are here tonight, and our Board of Education, most importantly. Thank you so much for your interest in learning more, for being here. It really does mean the world to us. We absolutely love working in the school district and serving the students here, and want to just see the positive momentum continue. So thank you, and have a good evening.